are integral to our way of life. The principle that an attack upon one is an attack upon all is the foundation of NATO, and this is what maintains peace through strength. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the death of destruction of the Second World War, which left everybody in Europe aware of what needed to happen, and we began NATO as that result. But this collective defense draws its strength through the unity, and the correlation is, of course, that division is the main weakness. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Her Excellency, Hanne Ulrichsen, Ambassador of Norway to Canada, who will be introduced shortly. This discussion will allow Canadians to hear about the importance of NATO to Norway and explore Arctic security, new and emerging threats, energy security, and the future of Canada and Norway cooperation. We hope you will join us and continue to engage with the NATO Association as part of our community online via Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X, which is formerly Twitter. I encourage all of you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can be part of future events as well. Now, Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. And before her arrival in Ottawa, the ambassador has been the director for the section of the Middle East and North Africa at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She has previous diplomatic experience that ranges from places like Amman all the way to Washington, D.C. She has brought also experience from the Prime Minister's office in Norway, as well as working with the Norwegian Intelligence Agency and the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us. And I'm very pleased right now to hand off to our three moderators, Matthew Sunil, Avani Singh, and Tristan Price. Folks, carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Opitz, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our diplomatic speaker series, exploring Canada's relations with its NATO allies and partners in a constantly evolving global security environment. My name is Avani Singh, and I'm an engagement coordinator with the NATO Association of Canada.
I'm Tristan Price. I'm an engagement coordinator of the NATO Association of Canada.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Sunil, and I am a program editor with the NATO Association of Canada.
Today, we will be discussing Norway's role in NATO. Before we get started, I'd like to give a brief history to Norway's participation in NATO. We'll be discussing Norway's role within NATO. In order to begin, I'd like to give a brief overview of Norway's history in the alliance. Norway became one of NATO's 12 founding members in 1949, joining to secure its sovereignty and strengthen collective defense against Soviet expansion. As a country with a direct border with Russia and a strategic position in the Arctic and North Atlantic, Norway has always been central to NATO's northern security posture. During the Cold War, Norway hosted key surveillance and an early warning infrastructure and contributed significantly to NATO's deterrence efforts along the northern flank. It balanced strong defense cooperation with allies while maintaining a long-standing policy of not hosting permanent foreign bases in peacetime. Since the 1990s, Norway has remained an active contributor to NATO operations, participating in missions in the Balkans, Afghanistan, Libya, and Iraq. Today, Norway provides essential capabilities in the Arctic, including F-35 fighter jets, P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, and a modernizing submarine fleet. It regularly hosts large NATO exercises such as cold response, enhancing interoperability in winter and Arctic conditions. Following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Norway has increased defense spending and become one of the largest per capita supporters of Ukraine through its multi-year Nansen program. With Finland and Sweden's recent accession to NATO, Norway now plays a key role in shaping a more integrated and secure Nordic region. This morning, we're honored to be joined by Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Norway to Canada, Hanne Ulrichsen, who brings deep experience in diplomacy, Arctic policy, and international cooperation. Her work reflects the strong and growing partnership between Canada and Norway as northern allies, committed to stability, security, and the rules-based international order. With that, we would like to get started with the moderated discussion.
Thank you, Ambassador. The first question we'd like to ask is, the future of the High North and Arctic is increasingly contested and threatened. In response, NATO's Combined Air Operations Center has been implemented in Bodø to lead and coordinate air operations in the Nordic region. What are some challenges and lessons learned from the opening of the CAOC? Furthermore, what are some lessons Canada can learn from the CAOC to bolster its Arctic security?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I've only been posted to Canada for 3 months. We arrived from Norway in late August, but I will try to answer the questions as best I can. So to your question regarding KEOK, this Combined Air Operations Center was officially opened 10th of October in Bodø. It will have particular responsibility for command and control of the airspace in the Nordic region and of the High North. And this is important not only for Norway, but also for Canada. Coordination by the KEOK of air operations will, together with other measures by Canada and other NATO members, contribute to bolster Arctic security. Through KEOK, the air operations capabilities of new NATO members, Sweden and Finland, will be part of a combined air force of 250 fighter aircrafts in the European North. This establishment of the NATO Center is also important for the city of Bodø. It not only will make Norway safer, but also bring benefits to the local communities that will see major investments in the year ahead. In the security policy context, Norway believes that having strong local communities in the north is of great value. Thanks.
Thank you. So Norway has been working with Germany to push for Canada to select the KTMS submarine for Canadian submarine procurement that is coming up. And we know that was one of the submarine options that was selected. So what lessons can Norway, who operates such submarines, tell us about its effectiveness up north, and also how it could help with interoperability within NATO partners like Germany and Norway?
Well, I think it just one point of clarification. We're not operating these subs yet. They are in production. We will receive the first one in 2029. We have ordered 4 of them, and we just released a press release today that we are now in dialogue with Parliament to acquire 2 more, which makes a total of 6 submarines. But of course, we welcome Canada's decision to shortlist the German-Norwegian submarine program. And if Canada chooses to join, this will strengthen NATO's interoperability, and it also will enhance operational benefits for all of us. I think that a strategic partnership between Norway, Canada, and Germany on a submarine program would significantly strengthen NATO's northern maritime flank. It would also enhance deterrence in the North Atlantic Ocean. It will also give Canada access to a modern submarine platform that is developed for northern conditions. And it will also enable the sharing of experience, technology, and operational solutions among 3 countries facing many of the same maritime challenges. As I mentioned, Norway has ordered 4 of these submarines. We are now in the process, so hopefully adding 2 to that group. And the expected delivery of the first submarine to Norway is 2029. I just also wanted to comment on our cooperation with Germany. We have had this submarine cooperation for almost 10 years now. And over this past decade, the cooperation has matured considerably. The level of mutual trust has never been stronger. And it is really the result of a sustained effort, a commitment, and a close collaboration over many years. So throughout this journey, numerous challenges have been addressed, and it has not always been easy, but they have been overcome, and whether they have been technical, organizational, or political in nature. And one important guiding principle for this cooperation has been challenged on several occasions. That is the commitment to identical submarine design by both German and Norwegian stakeholders. Nevertheless, this principle has proven to be essential because it is critical to maintaining the efficiency, the interoperability, and cost-effectiveness throughout the entire life cycle system. So a strategic partnership between Norway and Canada and Germany on a submarine program based on interoperability, solid knowledge of the Arctic, would significantly strengthen NATO's northern maritime flank, and it will also enhance deterrence in the North Atlantic.
Thank you for your answer, Ambassador. Moving on to a different question, we'd like to focus on the Gulf Stream, which pushes warm water towards Norway and allows for Norway's north to be much more hospitable than Canada's, especially in regards to the lack of freezing waters and packed ice. How does this difference in climate reflect between Canadian and Norwegian efforts in the Arctic, especially regarding icebreaker capabilities?
Well, I think it's important to be aware that the Norwegian Arctic is very different from the Canadian Arctic. It's much more hospitable. 10% of Norwegian citizens live north of the Arctic Circle. I grew up north of the Arctic Circle. I took part of my education at the University of Tromsø. So because of the Gulf Stream, it is much less demanding for us to build infrastructure, to offer public services, and offer higher education and high quality healthcare, or to develop business activities than it would be in the Canadian Arctic. So the waters, because of the Gulf Stream, along the entire coast of the Norwegian mainland are mostly ice-free. This is a hugely beneficial for instance, for the fisheries industry and also for our very large petroleum sector. And the Norwegian Coast Guard is operating 4 vessels with icebreaking or ice-strengthened capabilities. They are in Norway organized under the armed forces. But in general, in Norway, we don't normally need icebreakers except in the area around the archipelago of Svalbard, which is, for those of you that might not know, it's located like halfway between the Norwegian mainland and the North Pole.
Thank you. And speaking of Svalbard, so we know that up north, there's the territory of Svalbard, which under the Svalbard Treaty is Norwegian. But this treaty also allows for a very special operation of the territory. So it assigns it to Norway, but it also allows for signatories like Russia to establish settlements for research and economic rights. It's a visa-free zone. So can this sort of treaty, can Svalbard be seen as a roadmap for peace and stability up in the north? Or has the new great power competition introduced new threats to the treaty when it comes to security and sovereignty?
Well, I think it's important to remember that the Svalbard Treaty of 1920, it gave Norway full sovereignty over the archipelago. Svalbard is an undeniable part of the Kingdom of Norway, while other signatory countries are free to exercise their right on the archipelago. This solution has ensured responsible governance, stability, and low tension in this important region for over a century. There are no other unclaimed land areas in the Arctic, so I'm therefore not sure whether we can use the Svalbard Treaty as a roadmap for how to secure peace and stability in the Arctic. The Svalbard Treaty restricts military use, but the archipelago as such is not demilitarized. Norway has the opportunity to take defensive measures alone or with allies if that is necessary. Svalbard is covered by the NATO treaty, and that includes Article 5. Norway maintains a restrictive policy on foreign military presence on the archipelago. And then I just wanted to add that the High North is something that we know really well, and we have an ambition to maintain a lead in ideas about the North so that people can come to us for knowledge and to understand the reality. And the tension here in our part of the world, here in the North, we feel it, but it does not originate from the North. It stems from elsewhere because we are able to maintain peace, stability, and cooperation here in the North. So our ambition in the Arctic of Norway, including Svalbard, is clear. We want it to remain a region characterized by stability, cooperation, respect for sovereignty, and a shared willingness to solve cross-border challenges. And we will, of course, continue to work with allies and partners such as Canada to achieve this vision.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Continuing on the theme of security, what we'd like to focus on is more European security, shifting it over. Norway recently signed a contract with Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace for additional NASAMS air defense components. How does this procurement tie into Norway's role in NATO's integrated missile and air defense strategy? And what lessons can Norway highlight for allies, including Canada, on procuring technologies to protect against threats to aerospace?
Well, I think det var ikke det spørsmålet som hun stilte. Det var at de har byttet på rekkefølgen. Just a second, yeah. Okay, it was just a different order of the question, so I just needed to look at my talking points. But yes, that's right. Norway has ordered a new NASAMS air defense systems. And this will, of course, strengthen our capability to counter air attacks. The contract that Norway signed is valued at approximately 190 million, with delivery expected in 2026 or 2027. And I think the war in Ukraine has demonstrated how crucial air defense is. So as a NATO member, we must shoulder greater responsibility for national and regional security as well, and we have to promote more equitable burden sharing. So to date, a total of 15 countries have procured the NASAMS air defense system, including the US, Norway, Finland, Spain, and Australia. Widespread adoption of this system significantly strengthens interoperability within NATO and among other partner nations.
Thank you, Ambassador. Staying on that topic of European security, as a nation that borders Russia at the very top of the continent, what precautions has Norway taken in response to Russian aggression in the present day?
Well, let me start by saying that if you look at the geography, we share a 196-kilometer long border with Russia in the northeast. And the Norwegian armed forces keep an eye on Russian military activity every day. We are very conscious about the importance of managing our relationship with Russia in a way that safeguards Norwegian and allied security interests, while at the same time, it's very important for us to avoid unintended escalation. So I just wanted to highlight 3 points with regard to the precautions that we've taken. It was mentioned in the introduction, but we are investing heavily in our defense and resilience. We have a historic defense package of 84 billion Canadian dollars. We are expected to reach 3.4% of defense spending by the upcoming NATO Ankara summit next year. As a second precautionary measure, we are increasing our defense capabilities. Norway recently purchased 52 F-35 fighter jets. We've also bought 5 P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircrafts. And 3 months ago, we signed a historic contract to buy 5 new frigates from the UK. And these frigates are especially equipped to detect submarines. So like Canada, we have chosen the UK as our partner for this purchase. And I should add that this is the biggest defense procurement in Norwegian history. We also have equipped our Coast Guard with new Jan Mayen class offshore patrol vessels. And this week, Norway signed an extensive agreement on defense cooperation with the UK. Closer integration of Norwegian and British forces, cooperation on the operation of new frigates, rapid reinforcement of Norway in the times of crisis and war, and joint drone project in the High North are central to that cooperation. And not least, my third point, through a partnership with Germany, Norway is now acquiring up to 6 submarines, and we are, of course, hoping that Canada would join that partnership.
Thank you. And on that note of bordering Russia, so Norway had self-imposed a restriction where Norwegian and NATO operations beyond the 24-degree longitude line, which is near Russia, was not to be used for any military operations and training. So what were the considerations? Because now there's been sort of an easing of that rule when it comes to Russia and in regards to NATO allies, the new ones, especially like Sweden and Finland.
Well, important question. I think we should remember that since 1949 and until very recently, Norway has had this self-imposed restriction regarding allied training. Troops from NATO countries were not allowed to operate east of 24 degrees longitude in northern Norway. We have this exercise called Response that takes place in March in northern Norway every year, and it means that activity could not take place no closer to the Russian border of 230 kilometers. That would be then to the east. So this is grounded in our aim to remain a predictable neighbor to Russia and to help maintain low tension in the north. And this continues to be our policy. But with Sweden and Finland joining NATO, the alliance territory in the north has changed. It has become bigger. But also since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Norway has adjusted this policy of self-imposed restriction. So the reason for the change relates partly to the new geopolitical realities, but it is also partly a result of Sweden and Finland now being members of NATO. So the adjustments facilitate increased training and cooperation with allied countries, including cross-border training with our Nordic neighbors in the Arctic. And then I also just wanted to mention that in spite of Norway's strong support for Ukraine today, we still managed to maintain contact with Russia on two important issues. That is the search and rescue, where we cooperate at sea, and we also cooperate with Russia on the management of the fish stocks in the Barents Sea.
Thank you, Ambassador. How is Norway seeking to protect itself from hybrid attacks like cyber attacks, violations of airspace, and maritime threats? How does Norway view the growing drone and air intrusion threat as a part of larger hybrid warfare? And what steps is it taking with NATO to strengthen civil infrastructure resilience, early warning, and allied coordination?
Well, I think hybrid warfare is indeed something that we increasingly experience in Norway, as well as in many other European countries and also here in Canada. And the challenge is that whoever is behind them, they operate under the threshold of open conflict. And it is a big challenge for government to talk about attribution. And it's also very difficult to respond in the right way. So earlier this year, the Norwegian government presented a new national strategy. This was the first strategy that we have had on national security. It sets out three overarching strategic priorities. And the first one is that we're strengthening defense capabilities, which I've already touched upon. And the second one being that we're increasing societal resilience. And the third one being enhancing Norway's security. Hybrid threats are very difficult to detect. They're difficult to understand, handle, and counter. They require a stronger focus on situational awareness, deterrence, and on response. It also requires cross-sector exercises and cooperation with allies in the hybrid domain. So I think the ability of civil society to support military defense efforts and to assist Norwegian and allied forces operating in Norway and in the surrounding areas will be given higher priority in the future. We need to focus on interministerial cooperation, planning, preparations, and exercises that are essential for shared situational awareness and effective crisis management. My government has recently begun a structured effort to prepare the civilian population for a range of threats. These are threats ranging from the consequences of extreme weather to cyber attacks and also to a warlike scenario.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. In northern Norway, GPS jamming from Russia has become the new normal. How does this impact activity in the area, and are there any apparent or unapparent risks associated with these actions?
Yes, we have experienced GPS jamming. It is an increasing problem in the north. And for Norway, that has an impact on many parts of our society. The aviation, fisheries, and other civil entities that are dependent on GPS signals. And this is the reason why the Norwegian government recently decided to open a new office of the National Communication Authority in northern Norway, in Tromsø, to better tackle preparedness in the region. So this is part of our increasing presence in the north, and it is an important part of increasing the security and preparedness in Norway.
Thank you, Ambassador. Shifting the conversation towards civil preparedness, with increasing climate-related risks in the Arctic, including infrastructure vulnerabilities and energy security challenges, how is Norway integrating climate resilience into its broader civil preparedness strategy?
I think the first point I really would like to raise is that the Arctic is warming faster than any other region in the world. This creates, of course, new opportunities, but for Norway and for the citizens in Norway, this has consequences also for everyday lives. It also has consequences for our security. So Norway is now actively integrating climate-related risks, both into our civil and our security preparedness. We are supporting the work of the NATO Center for Excellence for Climate Security in Montreal, a work that we're very grateful that Canada has the lead on. We have a person seconded to that center, and that provides important information, I think, to government bodies and decision makers. And a basic principle in our civil preparedness planning is that the institution responsible for a sector in Norway is responsible for taking climate change into consideration at all times. This means, in practical terms, that all ministries, government agencies, and regional and local authorities must assess climate risk and implement adaptation measures in their activities. This means that, for instance, climate considerations must be built into land use planning, infrastructure design, and building standards, so that new developments are resilient to future extremes such as heavier rainfall and flooding that we actually see quite a lot of in northern Norway already now. So in our security planning, we see climate change as a threat multiplier that needs to be integrated into national security strategies, Arctic strategies, defense planning, and also our foreign policy planning. And these are direct impacts like more mudslides, easier access to the Arctic, or the impact on civilian and military infrastructure, or the melting of the permafrost. And we have to account for how climate stress can worsen conflicts and instability abroad.
Thank you. On that note of sort of hybrid threats and civil preparedness, how has Norway been preparing to protect its civilian and economic interests from Russian hybrid warfare, such as underwater cable anchor dragging? We see the Shadow Fleet sort of come over and start cutting international cables, airspace violations, as we've seen with drones and aircraft, and also live fire exercises in what is seen as international fishing zones.
Well, the Norwegian government is enhancing local and national capacity to counter hybrid threats. And the ability for digital and space-based monitoring in the north is being strengthened. Border control is being improved, and security along the Russian border is being reinforced with new sensors and new surveillance systems. The border region that we have with Russia is central to our preparedness, and it will receive improved infrastructure, surveillance and mobility, both military and civilian, in cooperation with Sweden and Finland. And in the years ahead, we must expect increased activity in our maritime areas. So the government of Norway will strengthen maritime security and situational awareness in our surrounding areas by investing in new military vessels and underwater capabilities, intelligence, surveillance, and closer civil, military, and public-private cooperation.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Looking forward, as Norway increases its defense expenditure to 5% of GDP, alongside NATO allies, what does Norway see as the top 3 strategic priorities for Norway within NATO? For example, the Northern Flag deterrence, expeditionary capability, industrial resilience, or energy security?
Well, I hope that everything I said up until now shows that the most important thing for Norway's long-term security is defending NATO's northern flank and defending the Arctic. That is a top priority for Norway's armed forces. And this includes surveillance, anti-submarine warfare, and securing sea and air lines of communication in the North Atlantic and Barents region. So we will continue to contribute to the collective defense within NATO, and we will support the implementation of NATO's new regional defense plans. We believe that investing in national capabilities, new submarines, frigates, air defense, expanded army and home guard is an important contribution to NATO burden sharing and to the alliance northern strategy. The second point I'd like to mention is that we would like to point to societal resilience and civil preparedness. We see it as a specific NATO-relevant priority to develop strategies to withstand hybrid threats, cyber attacks, and all sorts of undue pressure. This implies for Norway an obligation to protect critical infrastructure, to improve our cooperation between civilian and military stakeholders, but also to contribute to NATO's efforts to strengthen resilience against emerging security challenges. And the third and last point I'd like to mention is that Norway has a very important role to play with regard to upholding values that are shared among NATO member countries. This means respect for international law, support to Ukraine, and reinforcing NATO's political role with a focus on peace, stability, and the rules-based order. Cross-cutting issues like climate change, the security of undersea infrastructure, and these changes are increasingly woven into how Norway defines its long-term priorities within NATO.
Thank you so much for your inputs and insights, Ambassador. We will now open the floor to audience questions as well as questions from our live stream. For those watching, please continue sharing your questions in the chat and we'll address as many as possible in the time remaining. Ambassador, we're going to begin with the Q&A questions. How do Norwegian relations with its indigenous people up north compared to that of Canada?
I receive that question a lot. Couple of things. The first one I've touched upon, it really relates to the difference of the two Arctics, that it's in Norway, the 10% of the population that live in the north, they have very well-functioning infrastructure on the basis for their societies. And the Sami people in Norway is an important part of that. They have their own parliament. They are consulted on every decision that the government takes. And they are very integrated in our society. In Canada, the distances, your Arctic is much, much bigger. The infrastructure is much more complicated. The connectivity, it's much more difficult. Just as an example, we have 2 fiber optic cables going from the mainland of Norway to Svalbard to ensure communication. And that is, for the indigenous people up north, I think infrastructure is essential. Digitalization of societies is important. And then I should say that our government is focusing on truth and reconciliation. I think that Norway can learn a lot from Canada in what you have done so far. We had our own commission on truth and reconciliation, and that was inspired by the Canadian process. In Norway, this is an ongoing process, and we have not at all done everything right. But we're continuing to integrate the Sami people into the work of the government.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can you please talk about how Norway is navigating the threat of the AMOC destabilization between 2 and 2.5 Celsius? As we know, 2 degrees Celsius can be surpassed as early as 2032 to 2035.
Well, climate change is of course very, very important part of the Norwegian policy and foreign policy. It's the main focus of my government. The government has taken a lot of measures to reduce emissions and to contribute to not that number increasing from 2 to 2.5. Unfortunately, it's not going globally the way we would have liked. But Norway is investing heavily in technology. We have a CCS, carbon capture storage, which is on the west coast of Norway. Northern Lights, which was opened this year. We have also provided a lot of support to investments in, for instance, electrical vehicles. If you travel to Oslo, you would see that there are charging stations for electrical vehicles everywhere. There are incentives to buy an electrical vehicle, and we have a very, very high percentage of electrical vehicle in the city that also contributes to reducing the emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from the YouTube chat. How important to Norway is continued communication with Russia when it comes to regional tensions?
One of the most important, let me start by saying we've had, like I said in my intervention when I was answering the questions, it's important for us to be a reliable and predictable partner to Russia in the north. That means clear communication and having the opportunity to communicate when it's necessary. And this particularly relates to search and rescue. Because if there is an incident in the high north, in the oceans outside of Norway, that, for instance, would include a Russian fishing vessel, we need to have that opportunity to talk. But on a political level, that contact is at a minimum for clear reasons. But the Norwegian government believes in dialogue. So we have dialogue with everyone, less with Russia now than before, but we're putting a lot of effort into being a stable and predictable neighbor. We had the chairmanship of the Arctic Council until last year, and we have put a lot of effort into making the Arctic Council still operational and working as a tool in the north.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. One more question from the YouTube chat. A viewer said, I heard you speak about hybrid threats, which we know includes both threats internal and external to a country. How does Norway intend to stop misinformation or disinformation relating to climate change and law?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure I have the answer. I think the most important part in any disinformation campaign or hybrid warfare is to create situational awareness among the population, spreading information that this is ongoing, and so that on an individual basis you're actually able to look with eyes. Is this where is the source where this comes from? I think Norway is a very digitalized country, it's an advantage on the one hand. It's a disadvantage when it comes to hybrid could be. And we have a lot of work to do on using AI and using being able to identify sources or being if we are exposed to disinformation campaigns. So there is a lot of work ongoing, but we can be better. And we have a strategy that we launched in 2025 that is now for the next 5 years, how we're going to strengthen our resilience against disinformation. But this work is ongoing, and I think we have a lot to learn and a lot to do in the next 5 years.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That wraps up our question and answer section. I'd like to hand it back to Ted Opitz, who will be asking our final question and then beginning our closing remarks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ivani. Ambassador, when I was an MP, I did spend some time on the Arctic Council, and at that time, China was claiming or making a claim that they were an Arctic nation. So they've obviously shown an increasing interest in the Arctic, especially in terms of shipping and resource exploration and so forth. So my question is, how does Norway view China's presence in the region, and do you think NATO should take a more active role in monitoring and responding to Chinese activities in the Arctic?
Well, I think we have since the outset said that Norway is we like to talk about ourselves as NATO's ears and eyes in the north of the alliance. We're doing a lot of important work that together with allied partners. But let me answer first with regarding kind of the activity in the Arctic. I think that the key here is situational awareness, having the capabilities to be able to monitor what is actually going on. And together to do that, we need to invest in capabilities, but we also need to have good partners such as Canada to make sure that we're actually able to do that. We need to cooperate even more closely with the Arctic countries, and Norway has, together with Canada, taken initiatives inside of NATO to put the Arctic on the agenda. So there is work ongoing inside of NATO, and I think that if when it comes to presence in the North, increased role, I think it's a careful balancing act. We know that NATO is active in the North through Norway and through other allied countries. And when it comes to Chinese activity or China's interest in the North, they are like any other countries. They have their rights to pay attention to that area. They have presence in Svalbard that has been agreed with the Norwegian government, and they have a research facility there. So I think that we are observing activity in the North, but we would not oppose activities by any other, as long as it's outside of Norwegian mainland.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your Excellency, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us today. On behalf of the NATO Association of Canada, we're very grateful for your time and thoughtful perspectives on the importance of NATO and the enduring partnership between Norway, NATO, and Canada, and the shared commitment to our peace and security. And I'd like to particularly thank you. And in your comments, you mentioned Norway's support to Ukraine, and in particular air support, which has been air defense rather, which has been particularly important recently. I'd like to thank you for that, and I'd like to thank Norway because you've also mentioned your very, very hard work at increasing your GDP on defense procurement and safety and security, reaching as much as 3 to 4% next year, which is an incredible achievement. So thank you so much for that. Everything that you've offered has been absolutely brilliant today, and I know that our panelists and the people watching on our YouTube channel and the people that will watch later will find it just as insightful. And we appreciate, speaking of which, everyone who joined us for this discussion. Encourage you to stay connected to the NATO Association online and through our social media channels and on YouTube, where you can access the recordings of today's conversation and others and learn about our future events. Thank you again to our audience. And again, Your Excellency, thank you very, very much for an engaging and informational dialogue. And we look forward to our next session. Thank you and have a wonderful day.